Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week I'm back in Reykjavik. It's a nice sunny day, we have very deep snow out here. I've had a really nice Christmas break back in the UK, and now I'm back in Iceland. We had some blazing northern lights last night. It's nice to be back, it's nice to be home. And I have a special episode for you guys today as the Christmas break comes to an end. It is the second Games of the Year episodes, and today I have a special guest, friend of the show, Louis Brooks, one of the hosts of Time Played 3HR, one of my very favourite video game podcasts. Always a good time to talk to Louis. Louis has really interesting taste in games, likes atmospheric games, likes games that look back and have a sense of video game history, and likes driving games. Louis likes all kinds of very specific things and always brings a bunch of interesting games to the table. And this conversation was no exception. So I hope that you enjoy it. I will preface this episode, unfortunately, I think I really screwed up the audio on this episode. I was recording on a different mic to usual, in a different place to usual, and I think I nudged the gain on my mixer just before we started recording, and I've ended up with loads of gain on my voice, so it's peaking all over the place. So I'm really sorry about the audio quality of this episode. I've done my best to EQ it and to make it reasonable. So hopefully you can enjoy it, even if you just listen to what Louis is saying. So for those of you who are auditorially sensitive, I'm sorry for the quality of this episode. I've done my best to salvage it. And if you are finding the show for the first time, because we always have a lot of people tune into the Games of the Year episodes, please rest assured that usually the show sounds a lot better than this, at least my audio does. Louis' audio is perfect. Bless him, he did a really good job with that. So it's just my side of the conversation that sounds a bit weird. Don't let it put you off if you're a first-time listener. We have a load of Games of the Year episodes. We have one last week, recorded with Brian Skirsha of Pixelated Playgrounds podcast. We have one next week with Brad Galloway of GameCritics.com and So Video Games podcast. And I will be doing at some point across either this New Year period or next week, I'll be doing my own final cut. That is a final Games of the Year podcast where I run down my own top games of the year with some honourable mentions, some talk about games that made a good impression in various ways, and then a top 5 of the very finest games of 2022. I really like this time of the year. I love making this content. I love looking back across the year that was. I love hearing other people's favourite games and discovering some new ones as well. And in this Games of the Year episode, Louis had some great picks, several of which I had never heard of before, which is getting increasingly rare. You know, if you have your eye on what's going on in games, you hear about most things if you listen to podcasts and follow the news shows and look at the reviews and that sort of thing. So it was really exciting to get a few that I'd never heard of before. So thanks very much to Louis for sharing his Games of the Year here. And finally, before we launch into that conversation, I will just mention this is a patron-supported podcast. If you would like to get some bonus episodes, join the Patreon Discord, suggest games to be covered on the podcast, and so forth, you can find all of that at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. Big thank you to all of my existing patrons, and thank you very much to you if that's something you end up considering. And with that out of the way, let's move on to this Games of the Year episode with Louis Brooks of Time Played 3HR. Alright, I'm very happy to be joined for this second Games of the Year episode by a friend of the show, Louis Brooks of Time Played 3HR. Hello Louis, how are you?
Hi John, I'm okay. I have the endings of a flu/cold thing, so I apologise if I sound a little bunged.
You sound fine. How's your Christmas been?
Yeah, it's been alright. It's been a lot of relocating to different families, and now we're back at home and I'm enjoying not doing anything particular, which is nice. And then gotta get starting work again soon, but for now just doing very little.
Did you get any time for games and stuff, or was it all family stuff?
Yeah, there's always time for some gaming. I got a Steam Deck, not for Christmas, just the last couple months. So that really proved its worth, traveling around. So that's been good. Just have that like for an hour or two here or there.
That's pretty exciting. I was kind of on the fence about getting a Steam Deck myself.
Yeah.
I've never been a big Steam guy. I think we've talked about this before. I've always had trouble with using a Mac and controller settings and stuff. But you're like a proper PC gamer, aren't you? Or you've been using Steam a long time, so has it worked out nicely?
Yeah, it's good. It was a bit of a just random purchase. I just kind of decided. I had been like thinking about it, but not thinking about it for ages, and I still think they're pretty dumb, but I really like it. It's like the ultimate backlog machine. It's just like suddenly there was like, oh, here's all the games that I've wanted to play but haven't had the energy to like sit at my desk to play, and they're suddenly all just available in my hands on my bed, and I can just like power through these like couple hour long games, or like it like emulates anything you want it to as well. So like all the stuff I wanted to check out on PS2 and PS3 and stuff, it's all just there. And yeah, it's a pretty neat little guy. It's huge. Oh my gosh, it's huge. But it's good.
Right, and I haven't heard. Have you guys done your end of year episode, or are you planning one this year for a Time Play Trio?
We will. We did an episode. We recorded another episode on Cyberpunk 2077 and the anime show Edgerunners like a couple weeks ago, but the audio is completely buggered, so I don't think that's going to happen. But at the end of that, we said we would do our usual GOTY ep, whatever that means, especially because like we've done a lot less episodes than we have in the past this year, so it'll be a weird one, but we are going to do that hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So that'll be fun.
Oh, that's a tragedy about the Cyberpunk episode. I'd like to hear you guys talk that one through.
Yeah, I think it's kind of half there, but my side of the audio just like melted every once in a while, so like Loki's just talking to himself, and I don't think I have it in me to try and like piece together the conversation and pick through all the audio, which is unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah, I played that game this year as well. Actually, I played it. I was waiting for them to fix it, basically.
Yeah.
And for it to come out on a proper next gen version. And so played it when version 1.5 came out. And I guess I was a Cyberpunk skeptic at first because of all of the crap that was surrounding it. You know, all of the there was some trans issues that the game had, and sexualization of trans people, and then there was the crunch issues that it had, and the whole thing just seemed a bit off. But I played it out of curiosity, having picked it up for 20 quid on sale, and became an absolute convert and absolutely loved that game.
Oh, really?
I think I had 90 hours in it.
Yes, there's so many excellent reasons not to play it. But yeah, I was a big fan. I played it not long after. I think actually we talked about it on your last year's GOTY app, maybe. I think I might have named it as one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a big fan. It's a strange game, but I think it's just got some good vibes, you know, overall. Just some like good chill out, drive around, talk to weird people vibes. Interesting game, really interesting game.
Yeah, I think of that as your thing, really. If there is a game where you can cruise around the streets of a city and just do a few things here and there and chat to some people and look at the light reflecting from big glass buildings, I think that's probably a Louis game.
I would agree. I typically like games where they kind of leave you alone and let you just wander around massive spaces, and sometimes weird things happen, but most of the time you just get to enjoy the car feel or the horse feel or whatever vehicle you're in. That's mostly what I dream of.
But I wanted to ask you, actually, because I heard that you have been dabbling in making game environments over the last little bit. And I saw a couple of screenshots of you putting together a little isometric-looking room with some, it looked like a little Stanley-ish, like a computer and a desk and some bits here and there. How has that been going? How did that come about?
Oh, good. I think it was 2020. I did a like a short course in game art production. It was going to be like at this college in London. It was like a 20-week short course, but obviously COVID hit, so it was online, which honestly was ideal because I think it didn't have to travel all the way across London to do this thing. And it was just kind of, it was a pretty short like top line, but also like a lot was covered, kind of walking through the entire sort of, I guess what you describe as like a AAA production timeline of like workflow. So like modeling, texturing, and like setting up in Unreal Engine. And I think the room you're describing is that's the sort of thing I did for that course was like, we had to do a diorama basically of a scene, and that's kind of what I ended up with. And I wasn't planning on like making games or anything. I just I like learning things. I like 3D stuff in general. Obviously I like games. So I just wanted to do it, and then I kind of realized actually this year that like, well, I know how to like model the thing and texture the thing and put it in Unreal. So like the only other thing is making a game, and so I've been mucking around with that the last few months. Unreal's wild. Like you can just make a game in Unreal with no understanding of how to make games. That's obviously a complete overstatement, but like it's pretty amazing how quickly you can get on your feet with that stuff. And it's been really nice. It's been really interesting. It's a wild space to sort of play around in.
Mm-hmm. So you just, I was actually wondering, because as you said, like the podcast Time Played 3HR has slowed down a little with the episodes, and I saw that came about and that you'd been making fun stuff, and I wondered if the two were connected, if you were just kind of using that time to try out something new, or if it was just scheduling with you and Locke.
Yeah. It is kind of all of those things. I think both Lockie and I this year just got quite busy. His job got quite busy, and I changed jobs, and like I'm freelance now, so like I need to I work a lot more basically and a lot less at the same time. And I also started taking like ADHD medication, which completely changed my my interest in doing things. So suddenly I have a lot more energy to work on like personal creative stuff than like before. I found it really hard to start that stuff, and this year has been a year of like, I could play. I think I was thinking about this the other day, like one of the reasons I feel like I haven't played that many interesting games this year is because typically I would have spent the kind of little energy I did have on like an interesting game as a way to kind of like engage that part of my head. But this year I've had enough energy to like take that and make something myself instead. So I've had less time to play like games that seem really cool, and have been spending more time playing games that maybe are a bit more relaxing and kind of switch offy. So yeah, I think that, and then that's kind of had an effect on 3HR, and Loki's been super busy, and just kind of all over the place really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very excited about the idea of a Louis game, because obviously you do music as well, including the theme of the podcast and some other bits that you've shared in the past. So you've kind of, if you're putting things together in Unreal, and it seems like it could be a really nice thing. It seems like you've got a lot you could to bring to it. So it's kind of an exciting idea.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a very tiny little thing. Like it's like I think it's about 3 rooms. Mm-hmm. It's 3 rooms, and originally I wasn't planning on like making it like it really just like you could walk around. Mm-hmm. and then just alt tab out and like close it. Like there wouldn't be any like real interaction, and like it's a walking simulator like as they come, and but it's just a little bit more involved in like exploring some ideas of stuff that I want to do, and it's much more like informational than it is like artsy. It's not really like a game per se. But yeah, I'll stop fluffing around. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping. I was wanting to get done by the end of the year, but no. So I'm hoping sort of end of January, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I've been watching a good series actually. Do you ever follow? Do you follow the No Clip guys on YouTube?
Yeah. I do. I sort of check in on them every once in a while and like do a binge of like the last few episodes.
Because they've started this channel No Clip Crew this year where they just talk about their, I don't know, like road trips, personal things. And Jeremy Jane, who is one of the No Clip guys, I think he operates camera and stuff. He's been dabbling in game making as well. And he's had a really nice series called Jane Dev, where he just talks about him learning how to dabble in game making as well. And he's kind of showed some of the things that he's done, like just learning mechanics and talking through the whole process. I absolutely love it, actually. I like it as much as the no-clip stuff. It's really fascinating. Sorry?
Is he working in Unreal as well?
I'm not sure if he's in Unreal, but he's using one of those, maybe Unity. But he seems to be getting assets into environments and just linking them together in different ways. And he speaks about it all quite well. It's been fun to watch.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Have you ever like dabbled yourself? Have you ever mucked around with anything like that?
Not really. I mean, only as part of, I guess, my day job, which is like doing publicity for a video game company, which is like a user-generated content platform. So I've seen how games are made and hear about them every day in meetings and stuff. So I'm learning about it in a kind of ambient, unfocused way where it's just on the edge of my things I need to know about, if you know what I mean, to do the job. But it's definitely very interesting seeing how it's done and taking part in play tests and hearing conversations between people about how mechanics should be altered and feedback and all that sort of stuff. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah, it's wild. It's just wild how easy it is to like jump in. Again, caveat on easy, but like with like Unreal Engine 5, which is, you know, the arguably most advanced engine you can use. It's free to download, and you can literally just like pick a template, and there's just a big play button at the top, and you can just play the thing, and then it's there, and then you can export it, and then you could put it on itch.io, and there's like, and like that there requires almost no knowledge of anything to just literally put a thing on the internet. And then once you like start mucking about with the stuff in it, like then it becomes more and more your own, and suddenly it's like a whole thing, and it's wild, it's crazy. It's I love it.
And a couple of the games that you've got here on your list, you've got a list of games that you played this year. It's cut into a few sections. There are some that were new this year, 2022 games. There were some that were old, but you played them for the first time. Some that you want to play more of, and then a few upcoming games as well. And some of the ones that you have here, this is quite an interesting list you have here. As we were saying just before I hit record, a lot of the lists seem to have fallen into step that I've seen this year, because I do listen to a lot of Games of the Year content. So I was really happy to see that you've got some curveballs here, including two that I've never even heard of before, which is pretty rare these days. And some of them are solo dev projects as well, aren't they? Like, so this is a really interesting list you've got here. And the one at the top is a game that I attempted to play on Switch, but discovered that the text was not really possible. But so I was really attracted to this one and really, really drawn to it. And this game is Strange Horticulture. So tell me about how you came across this one.
Yeah, I feel like you would. This feels like a kind of a John kind of a game in a way. Like it's it is. What is there to say about Strange? Like, so have you played Papers, Please? I feel like you haven't played Papers, Please.
I've played a bit of it. So I've stamped some papers, and I've a little. So I get the sort of looking down on a desk concept. Yeah,
you get the gist of. Yeah, so like it is the closest you can get to Papers, Please without being about being a border patrol person. Instead of stamping papers, you are identifying plants and kind of giving them to people that come into the shop, and there's some like conversation and some mystery, and like there's a whole background kind of cultish thing going on, and like the plants are like sometimes a little supernatural feeling. So yeah, you have this kind of, I don't know, skeuomorphic desk thing, and you like look at a plant and you have this book that helps you identify what they are, and you're like, okay, so this plant is got strong stems and a funny odor, and then you look at all your different plants on the shelf and you pick out which one it is and you give it to the person, and if it's the wrong one, then there's a very light punishment, and that's kind of the whole thing. And yeah, you're navigating through this sort of light background narrative. I think the reason that I really loved it is because, well, Papers, Please is like one of my favorite games, and I love a game about like doing something really boring and repetitive. I love it when games manage to make that stuff like the mundane really interesting. And Papers, Please is like up there as one of the best at that. And Strange Horticulture, which is clearly heavily inspired by it, but with a nice little twist. And does some things that of its own that are quite interesting. Yeah, just it was just nice to play one of those games again. It's fascinating, like how I think that it's less strong than something like Papers, Please, because Papers, Please clearly created this kind of its own genre with these mechanics, and it fits perfectly within its narrative like setup, because it's all made at that same time by one person with this idea. Whereas Strange Horticulture is like, oh, what if we use Papers, Please genre and made it about plants? So it feels a little bit more disjointed, I guess. But it's still just like a lovely, I can't remember how long it was, like 7 or 8 hours, kind of, yeah, poking around in your shop, organizing all your plants. Like you have this big shelf that you can like lay them all out. So organize them by like type, and you have to label them yourself so you know what it is. And but yes, I would imagine on Switch, I think even I played it on Steam Deck, which also was too small. But Steam Deck has a zoom function to account for all the PC games that are not designed for a 7-inch screen. And I think even on the PC version, there's like a magnifying glass you can use, which is like a funny little like, we don't know what to do about the fact that we've made a game with loads of tiny text, so here's a magnifying glass. But also, it does kind of add to the like, the experience of being a person that's like examining plants, even though actually most of the time you're just using the magnifying glass to read like text of a book, which is a little strange. But it feels cozy and nice that I have that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking while you were speaking actually of other games where where it kind of simulates expertise to some degree. And it's really interesting when games do that. I was thinking of Heaven's Vault. Have you played that one?
I have that on Steam, and that's on my Steam Deck waiting to be checked out finally.
Right, because that one does something similar where you're a linguist, and so it sort of simulates the act of decoding an ancient language in a super gamified way. So you'll get like a fragment of a word, and once you've got it, it's like a jigsaw piece, and you put the jigsaw together and then you get the phrase or whatever. And it does make you feel like an expert or some kind of genius without you having to actually decode ancient languages, which is obviously a bit harder than in Heaven's Vault. But a Strange Horticulture, like how much of it is sort of automated or gamified? Like if you're trying to identify a plant, do you literally have to go to the books and read descriptions, or is it like matching shapes against?
So I think like it's, I think one of the things I wish it did was I wish it got a bit more complex with like how you identify things, or added a few more over time, like wrinkles into the kind of, or mechanics basically into the wrinkles, apparently is my word for game mechanics. Added wrinkles in to the gameplay, because like it gets a little, not stale, stale is a bit harsh, but it gets a little like, this feels a bit too, you're basically from the beginning to end, you're opening your book and you have an unidentified series of plants in front of you, and the book is written in a way that like whoever wrote it originally just wasn't particularly good at their job, because like they're missing most of the information about this plant. So it'll be like one paragraph for one plant might just say something about the stems, whereas the next plant will be about like the petals, or the other one will be about the aroma. And in a lot of ways, you're kind of just identifying like synonyms. So it's like someone might say like the odor is stinky, and then you might like examine the plant and you'll say, this odor is pooey or something. That's and you're kind of just doing that. And I think that is what I mean when it comes into like Papers, Please felt very consistent in that it really uses the fact that you're on a table and you're part of this very strict like fascist state that is like constantly changing the rules to change how many people can get in and out. So each day like it gets more complicated, and you're running out of desk space, and you're moving all your papers around all the time. Whereas in Strange Horticulture, it's never like you never need to worry really about any kind of pressure, which is nice. But it just feels like maybe it's slightly lighter in terms of like mechanical depth. It has some other stuff. So like you have this big map that you can open that like you gain energy by like completing the sort of basic tasks, and every once in a while you can then go explore areas of the map, and from there you'll get like clues how to find like certain flower types that then help you progress the story. And I think it has like multiple endings, but it's one of those games that has multiple endings, but it feels pretty linear. Like it doesn't, I don't know, maybe they're interesting. But it feels like just it's one of those things that at the end, maybe you give a certain flower to someone and then that changes the ending in a few minutes instead of it having much of an impact. But yeah, really cozy, chill game. I do wish the text was bigger because it's like a perfect handheld game. Like it's perfect just to sit cozy identifying plants. But if you can stomach squinting, it's a good one on the Switch.
Yeah, I think I might dip into that one again. I absolutely love the premise of it. I like games where you do boring things too. I was absolutely in love with the game Lake, where you just literally do a postal round. There's something about it where you strip away all of the, swords and aliens and guns and XP and skill trees, and you just do something repetitive, especially if it looks nice and the mood is good. It's a lovely feeling. I love games like that too.
Yeah, I think like not to go into like games with guns or whatever, and guns are bad, because it's not that it's bad or whatever. It's just that like guns just happen to be this kind of default mechanism for games. It's like you need something to do, and so here's a thing that's like very satisfying to do over and over again while other things happen that are interesting. And like I think you can just, if you're a good game developer, I reckon you could probably do that with like any bland repetitive task. Just use it as like a vehicle for telling an interesting story and stuff. So like I love games that do something with a different tool, basically.
Excuse me. Yeah, and this is like a pretty diverse list that you've got here, so it's going to skip around a bit in genre in a way that I quite like, actually. But we did touch on your love of driving games, and we've talked about it before, actually. Last time you were on the show, talked about your connection to cars and driving. And the next game that you've got here is not one that I have played, but it's probably the biggest driving game that came out this year, right?
Yeah, I kind of forgot it came out this year because it's been a long year and there's been so many of these games and they're all kind of the same anyway. So like it could have come out 3 years ago and I would have been like, oh yeah, that's probably about when I last played it.
Right, and I haven't played a game in this series since the original. I can't even remember what console it was on now. It might have been PlayStation 1 or something. But it's Gran Turismo 7.
Yes. It's the 25th anniversary of Gran Turismo this year, apparently. Because it tells you when you boot the game
up. That made me feel
old. Yeah, I played Gran Turismo 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 1 with my dad. So I just have very warm, nostalgic feelings toward them. The Gran Turismo series, I did a very long, strange solo episode on Timeplay 3HR this year about Gran Turismo and just how wonderfully bizarre I think it is. Its place in gaming culture as like a game, but also as kind of like this kind of consistent staple of like Sony's sort of portfolio. Such a fascinating thing. And yeah, Gran Turismo 7 is it's more Gran Turismo, so I don't have like love for it. I just care for the series deeply. It's a pretty good racing sim. It's, you know, it's usual kind of fascination with the mundane aspects of cars, and like I think, you know, they get so bogged down, and forever now they've just become so bogged down with like simulating things that they forget sometimes, I think, that like people also want to play a game. And so like it's not a racing game I would really recommend to anyone if you don't just like kind of look, like if you like to look at, if looking at the literal textual name of a car does something for you as a person, then Gran Turismo 7's probably for you. And then it just gets better from there, because they also have 3D models of them, and you can drive them. And but that's really kind of, for me at least, where it's always stopped. I've never got into like any of the multiplayer stuff, and I'm a perfectly fine racing game driver guy. I know how to follow racing lines and where to brake around chicanes, etc. But like, it's never really been about like getting fast times, and the mechanics, like the gameplay of like the way they set up races is so bland. It's so bland. But I love it, and I'm obsessed with the music and its soundtrack, and just the bizarre creative decisions they consistently make in every game. I can't get enough. I hope they keep making it forever and ever, and it never changes.
Well, I kind of used to play driving games a lot back in the era when this came out, and was playing rally games a lot and shaving seconds off my times and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And hadn't played a driving game for a really long time. And then last year played Forza Horizon 5, which to my surprise just completely sucked me in. But I think that from the sounds of what you're describing here, Forza is a very specific thing where it just like, it's lots of glitter and flash and spinning wheels, and you just get a new car every 5 minutes and just get this vast garage, and it's all numbers going up every time you do anything. Like even if you fall off a bridge into the water, you'll get air points or whatever. So you never feel like you're failing. You always feel like you're winning. And it's like a sort of hyper gamified open world driving game. And it sounds from what you've said here, and from a couple of reviews that I listened to at the time when this game came out, it sounds like a quieter game. It sounds like it's perhaps more invested in the cars themselves and just automotive interest, rather than just the numbers going up. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, I really like the Forza Horizon series, and I wish Polyphony Digital, the makers of Gran Turismo, would sort of have their stint at whatever their version of that looks like, because I think it would just be the best thing of all time. But but yeah, like I think the Forza Horizon series is about cars and like a joy of cars and driving, but it's much more just kind of pure fun. And if something isn't like fun, it's not in there, you know, whereas in Gran Turismo, like fun is not the goal. Fun, you might get fun out of it, but like each step is not considered to be fun. The way the progression works, I think progression is one of the things that Gran Turismo throughout the series. I can talk about Gran Turismo for a really long time, so I'll go as deep as you want. Stop me as soon as I go too much. But like progression in Gran Turismo has been, in my opinion, just like very flat for a very long time. It's followed basically the same structure from PlayStation 1 up till now, in that you get a crap car for 20 grand from a used store, and then you do a bunch of really crap races, and then you get a little bit of money and you buy a slightly better car, and it's that, and it's basically the same tracks, and like it just looks nicer each time. And this one they slightly mixed it up. They have this they had this like this virtual cafe you go to, and this little like picture of human, like the actual photo of a man pops up, and he has a name, and he's like, hey, go get whatever these cars and effectively and do this race, and then you come back and then he might give you another car, and when you drive up with a certain car, when I say drive up I mean enter the menu, he might give you like a description of that car, and it's not voice acted, it's just text, and it's like so, and it's obviously you've got this like chill tacky like cafe jazz playing, you're in a Starbucks effectively, and like it's just wonderful. It's like so, it's just strays this line of like super tacky and super luxurious all at the same time, and I adore it. It's and then I play it and I'm like, oh, I don't need to play this. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. It's like, yeah, I know what this is. And they never have the cars I like. No games have the cars I like because I need to be incredibly picky. And this one has also this whole like an example again of random creative choices of like they have like world history in as it relates to cars. So like with each brand, it's a celebration of these brands, you know, which is a whole thing to unpack. And it like with each brand, it's like, okay, so here's like all the cars, and here's a timeline of all the cars that came out in the last 100 years. But also interspliced on that timeline is like world history. So it's like, I don't know, it's like and weird world history. I think it's like you're looking at the Mini Cooper or something. This isn't an accurate timeline, but you're looking at the Mini Cooper, and then the next slide along is like, oh, PayPal was invented, and it's like, okay, this is absolutely bizarre.
I guess they're trying to sort of place these cars in history that people would recognize, like in a nostalgic sort of, where were you when this car came out kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I love it.
And I remember the only time I think I've seen this game was I think there was a demo of it where they just showed a car speeding along a road, and I think it was in a showcase, and afterwards all of the games had these super polished ads, you know, but Gran Turismo was just someone speeding along a road, and then I think it was for people that like these games and for them to see how good the water on the windscreen looks, how good the reflections in the roads look, the frame rate, the shadows from the trees, the skybox, and all of that sort of stuff. So does it feel like a 2022 game in that sense?
No, I don't think again, because they're so interested in realism, they don't make things look good. They make things look real. So everything looks flat and gray, and they've always looked like this. They've always looked flat and gray. Like, yeah, technically speaking, there's a lot of polygons on screen, and the reflections are pretty good, though not great. It's not using like full ray tracing or anything, and I think the ray tracing is only on when you're like in the replay mode. There's always these caveats. You can't release a Gran Turismo game without like, oh well, we did all this amazing stuff, like the tracks slowly wear down over the course of a year, but also the engines sound like vacuum cleaners still for some reason. We haven't got to that bit yet. We'll do that in like 5 years maybe. I don't know what their decision making process is. I desperately wish I want someone to do like I want No Clip to go and like, but not No Clip is usually quite like obviously they can only really get so much out of these developers, and like and it depends on you can't go to like a Sony owned studio and be like, so why does your game suck in this way? But it's also, you know, one of the most successful franchises of all time. Why is that? You can't do that. But I hope one day we get to hear about why that is.
Well, actually, in the Discord, as I've been doing these Games of the Year episodes, people have often been the most excited when they have heard about a game for the first time on a Games of the Year podcast, and I absolutely love that too. I think it's why I like Games of the Year episodes. I just comb them, looking for the games that I hadn't heard of before, and you know, in every personal top 10, there's probably one, you know, and you've actually got a couple here, and the first of them is a game called Sephonie, which is Sephenie. Sephonie. I've never heard of this game before, and I'm really excited that you've brought games I've never heard of before, because I feel like I constantly scrutinize games media to a ridiculous degree. So it's really fun for me to hear about one that I haven't picked up somewhere. So what on earth is Sephonie?
Sephonie is the latest game by the makers of Anodyne 1 and 2 and a few other bits and bobs. I think it's their second attempt at making a 3D game. They used to make the original Anodyne and a few other games by them who were like kind of pixel art. And then Anodyne 2 Return to Dust was this kind of PS2 Nintendo 64 aesthetic. I guess you'd call it a platformer puzzle game, and it would switch between 3D environments and like 2D Zelda-style dungeon crawl kind of thing.
And bizarre driving interludes.
Yes, and it's kind of, they're all hard games to describe in a sentence, I guess. But Sephonie is kind of their attempt at making a 3D platformer, which is, I was worried about when they announced it, because the movement mechanics in Anodyne 2 did not feel excellent, which is fine. It's not what it was about. And that stuff usually doesn't really bother me if it's not like the main point, but obviously Sephonie it is. So I was a little concerned, and it is definitely a strange feeling game, but I do like it for that. It does 3D platforming differently, which I'm always up for. The sort of setup for this is it's a really lovely like story, basically, and it is about these scientists that end up on this island to do just kind of research and get samples and stuff, and it basically turns out that it's like a very strange island, and they go into this cave, and suddenly the cave is like massively, impossibly large, and like multiple different biomes, and it's all kind of these big kind of platforming sections, and then you're kind of exploring. They basically jump in and out of these like narrative vignettes of the history, and like they all come from different cultures. I think there's a Taiwanese lady, an American Chinese lady, Japanese person, and I forget the other one. It came out at the middle of the year, and it's kind of about like the way cultures are different and clash, and it's very warm, and I like the writing, and same with Anodyne 2, and it's got a really nice cozy feel to it, and the actual mechanical thing of platforming does feel a little funky, but it's perfectly functional, and I quite like. It has this very strange thing where you kind of accelerate like a car, but you're a human. So you like, as if I remember rightly, you're pulling the trigger to speed up or like run fast, basically sprint. And then jumping is slightly off. I can't remember the specifics of it now, unfortunately, but it's never annoying if anyone's worried about that. It's perfectly functional, and the story and the way it's told, I think, is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played a little bit of Anodyne 2 after hearing you talk about it, I think, and it's a really interesting one. It's definitely one of those games out of time somehow. Like if you were to play it, could be, an indie game that was just finished, or it could be from the dawn of, 3D gaming. It's definitely a strange one. And as you said, it feels odd, like nothing feels slick, but it's also mesmerizing somehow. There's something about those games that fall between times or use an old-looking visual style in a contemporary game, like Paratopic and things like that, right? Where they slap on sort of PS1 textures onto polygonal shapes, but definitely the writing feels like a modern indie game writing. Is this one again in that sort of window of weird, or have they just made a contemporary game this time?
No, it's still like I would say the visuals are probably slightly. I don't know if I would say it's more advanced in terms of like generationally speaking. It's probably less interested in like recreating nostalgia from that perspective. Although it does feel like. It kind of feels like you're discovering places that you remember that you've never been to. Like it's and that's kind of how Anodyne 2 felt for me in a lot of ways. It's like I've definitely never been or seen any of this stuff. It's very strange, but it somehow all feels familiar and very personal. I think that's why I really like their games is even if I don't necessarily connect with the things they're saying, which I didn't all the time in like Anodyne 2 especially. I mean, neither really in Sephonie, like it's but they feel very specific to I think it's just a 2-person team to them. And that's kind of stuff that I really crave when it comes to games these days. Like even with indie games, there are so many amazing indie games coming out all the time, but they do start to follow a formula, and not just like visually or mechanically, but like emotionally as well. Sometimes it feels like we're hitting the same notes and I'm not really discovering or learning anything new. And consistently the team that made Sephonie, like it just feels like I'm playing something made by some people that I don't know, and that's really a lovely feeling. So Sephonie's a good one for that, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, what is the vibe that you take away from this one?
What sense? How are we describing vibe? How are we defining that word?
Louis, you love games that have a strong vibe. You love games that have an atmosphere that take you somewhere a little odd or have something very specific about them. And like if Anodyne 2 was like falling back in time through video game history and everything had sharp edges and odd textures, and it was just super retro video game feel to it. I've had a look at a screenshot of Sephonie while you were talking about it. It looks a lot more colourful. It looks a lot more. I'm seeing some sort of nature here, like an island, and the big cave that you're talking about. Sure. So is it more of a sort of a sense of place in this one?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's not dissimilar. It has this kind of. It has this kind of warm feeling with a slight sense of like I don't know, like unsettling feeling. Like I think Anodyne is the same, and I think that really only comes from like it being quite personal and feeling a little nostalgic, and I think the like exploring their kind of cultural differences in the team is really interesting. And that's like definitely like an interesting that's definitely different for me in a game like this. Yeah, I think there's just a warm unease to kind of everything they make that I find really valuable. And they somehow manage to, like, with relatively simple mechanics and stuff, that they somehow manage to like keep it fresh throughout the whole thing. And that's probably a combination of a bunch of things. Oh, there's also like a match 3 game that you have to do. I forgot.
Of course,
like
of course.
Half of it. It's like like, so basically you're identifying like plant and like flora and fauna of this island, and when you identify them, you basically have to do a match 3 game, and I think even if you want, you can like turn off the match 3 thing, which I didn't in the end. I thought I might, but I didn't in the end. It's quite cozy and the music's good. So it's like, yeah, I'll vibe out with some like poppy tunes for a sec. And that's also how you do like these kind of, I guess, what you would call boss fights of just like the main kind of flora and or fauna of the area. And you're effectively kind of curing it or helping it or whatever, or soothing it. Yeah, super cozy. Lots of weird little writings to sort of amuse yourself with that you come across, and yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I love games like this, honestly. I love games that are about nature recently. Like, you know, just things like Alba, where you're walking around on an island taking photographs of wildlife and putting them in your little book. And like the look of Terra Nil, that game where you're rewilding a wilderness. Really enjoying all of these games that like plug into ecological themes. And they tend to have a little bit of that cultural stuff with them as well. You know, I'm really happy for this strand of indie games to be going in that direction. Yeah,
did I see you played? There was something that I can't remember what it's called now. I played the demo of it. Is it Hidden Marsh?
Paradise Marsh. Yeah, that's another one. Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was that? I haven't played the full thing yet.
really good. I played that one in one sitting. It's a strange one. Yeah, you're dropped into this beautiful, not at all realistic, kind of low poly swamp, basically, procedurally generated in all directions, and the whole thing is just like a lovely time. And it has who did the soundtrack again? Someone great did the soundtrack. It might be Disaster Peace or one of those guys, or no, was it? Who was it who did Oxenfree? Scientific. It's one of those two. It's either Scientific or yeah. And the soundtrack is generative too, and it goes in time with which biome you're in. The biomes all repeat endlessly, and there's a day-night cycle. And it has this very strange stuff where you're catching bugs and then releasing them into the night sky. Absolutely beautiful game, great sense of humor. And yeah, that's a perfect example, really. It's just a game where you walk around looking at digital nature and chilling out. Yeah, I think you would really like that one, actually.
Yeah, it's on my list. There's a lot on there.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next one that you've got here is actually a pretty long game. I've played the demo of this one and was quite into it, actually, but I think I was into it in a way where I'm going to wait until it either comes onto Game Pass or is at a 60% off sale kind of thing. And this ticks one of your other interesting games, right, which is a really nice traversal mechanic. And this one is Dying Light 2, which is a zombie shooter with free running, an interesting seeming storyline. So I haven't seen this popping up on many lists, so I'm really interested to hear what you liked about Dying Light 2.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should like put it on here or not. I think I wouldn't say I was scraping the barrel or anything, but like I guess what I was saying earlier about like where I've been spending my time, I've been playing a lot more pretty straightforward open worldy games. And I think what I've kind of realized is that I really do like ticking little side quests off a list and like wandering around and picking stuff up and that's okay. And like Dying Light 2 in a way is probably it's probably like a game that in some ways, and I don't mean this in any like this is entirely a personal feeling, but some ways I'm a little embarrassed to admit I like, mostly just because of zombies, and just it's quite violent, and these are things that I don't typically connect with or want to be perceived as someone that does connect with. But I bought Dying Light 2. I think I bought it on sale. It came out like around the same time as Elden Ring, and also Horizon, I guess. So I managed to get it on sale, and I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy it too much because I played a little bit of the first one a few years ago and it didn't really connect with it for some reason. But Dying Light 2, I just had such a good time running around and like, yeah, picking up the stuff and climbing the things and hitting things with my pipes and kicking guys. There was this like, they did this like event where for like, I think it was for like a week, basically when I bought the game, which is very strange. They had this event on, which was forced. You couldn't opt out of it, which basically made the physics like 100 times more over the top. So for like the first half of the game that I played it, you do this like you can do this run and then dive kick thing, and it just like sent these guys, these gooey little men, just like hundreds of meters, and I just it was just exactly what I needed. It was around the time that I changed jobs and stuff, so it was just an ideal like relaxing, yeah. And as you say, I like traversal stuff. It's Mirror's Edge Catalyst was not a good sequel, not a good open world Mirror's Edge, and this is a good open world Mirror's Edge with zombies. Yeah, and it looks nice. Like I really like the environment art. It's the first area in is this kind of like old town kind of. It's in like, I think Dying Light 2 in a lot of ways is very generic. Obviously it's a zombie game, but it also in a lot of ways it does lots of things, probably things I don't even remember now, that make it feel quite distinct among its like contemporaries, like and subtle as well. Like I think it's kind of, I don't even know how you describe that architecture, but it's kind of like European, maybe even Eastern European, I don't know, kind of slightly dilapidated old town. and like that already feels quite distinct, and you wouldn't think it would work with all the free running stuff, but it does. And then when you get into the big area after that, it's like suddenly like these crazy huge skyscrapers, and you get like a wingsuit and stuff, and it doesn't break the free running. It still feels good to free run, even though you're climbing up buildings that are like hundreds of flights tall. I don't know how they did that. Yeah, it's a good time. The story is ridiculously bad, but like the rest of it is that's not true actually. Some of the I like some of the dialogue and stuff, but it does that thing. It like there you can blame the marketing, I guess, but like the whole like your choices matter, you know, that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know any game that has ever said that on the front of the box that really succeeds at that idea. It does not. It's like it's literally does the thing of like, all right, you took a base, and now you get to pick between two factions, and the blue one or the red one, and then I think some other choices have some effect on the ending, and it gets really dumb at the end.
Right, I heard about this actually. I've heard a review of this one where someone was saying that the most fun or distinctive thing about it was that depending on which factions you align with, the physical topography of the environment, especially the rooftops, seems to change with different settlements or different traversal methods opening up, right, based on whether you went with one bunch or another bunch, or something like that.
It does make some gameplay adjustments. So like if you choose the red guys, you get like kind of unexplainable like jump pads, or like these kind of neat, like they line up like these big soft sacks around the like perimeters of tall buildings, so you like jump into the sack and use it to break your fall, which obviously doesn't make sense, but it kind of does in a game, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it does affect gameplay a little bit, but it as always, it has that like conflict of like, you can choose the thing that you mechanically want to do, or you can choose the thing that you emotionally want to do, and they don't always align. And why it just doesn't, it never works for me. And I would much rather someone just tell one story, personally. Yeah, but like it doesn't really matter in the end, because like, yeah, it's just a great time running around. There's these really nice like the sort of later game kind of open world activity things of like these not towers, they're like factories or like power stations, and you go inside these power stations, and then you have to like free run around them, connecting up wires, and you like literally plug in this massive cable into this power generator, and then you drag the power cable behind you, and it like coils around the walls and stuff, and you only have like 10 meters of it, so you have to try and find the way to connect it to the other one. And I don't know why. I just thought that was really neat. I don't feel like I remember they did something similar for like one puzzle in like Last of Us 2.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. We have to throw the ropes over the fences and stuff, and it has good rope physics.
Yeah, but this game makes that an open world activity that you have to do like 10 times. But yeah, it's just stuff like that. It just like does little neat things. Yeah, I really like Dying Light 2. Yeah,
it's funny that you mentioned Horizon as well as like one of the games that's perhaps not your taste. That was a game that I really enjoyed this year as an open world game, actually, and it had some similar stuff. Like at the very start of the game, you come to a mining town, and there is a strike happening, and it's basically kind of a side quest. You can go into it as deep as you want, or you can just run straight past it. And I think a lot of people did run straight past the strike side story. But I was just very excited to have this new game I'd been waiting for, so I did everything.
Yeah.
And there was a cool point where after the town, there is an empty quarry just full of machines, and you kind of clear it out. You have to, for one reason or another. But because I had done the strike side quest, the quarry went back to work. So when I went back later, there were loads of people building scaffolding and pulling out stone and things like that. So it was nice to see like a large scale change to the world based on something that you had done. But again, like you've said, it didn't feel natural somehow. It was very much like you did A and so B, and not like affecting a world in an interesting organic way. It was just like this little,
You just saw the box in the game get ticked. Like it never feels authentic. It always feels like you can really just see the game whirring and like the mechanics of behind it very straightforwardly, which never really feels great. I don't think that's conducive necessarily to like any kind of like emotional kind of storytelling, really. But it is, mechanically it did stuff. I played Horizon. I liked it. I didn't love it. I didn't love the first one either, but I liked it. I don't think I liked it. Did I like it more? I think I liked it more than the first one.
It's got the flying
Did they feel
wing
similar?
thing and the climbing and the good climbing, or at least the slightly better climbing and being able to glide. I guess it's more fun running around in the game.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciated that slight shift to like, we're going to let you climb up anything you want, even if it doesn't necessarily look the best at all times. Like the first game was pretty limited sometimes, like where you could go, and it felt quite it felt quite closed in, whereas this one definitely feels just a bit more wide open. And I really like that thing. I don't know if other developers do it and I don't notice, or it's just super clear in Horizon, but for both games now they do this thing where like, and especially in this game because it's like in the title, the Forbidden West thing, where like the open world is a linear open world. So like the quests and the map kind of, you sweep across the entire thing. By the end of the game, you've then sort of moved very naturally, sort of almost always going forwards. And I think that feels really good. It feels like you're kind of traveling somewhere at all times instead of just kind of farting about. And I really like how they do that in the Horizon games. Yeah,
absolutely. Feels like a journey in a really cool way, and just a lot of set pieces along the way and a lot of beautiful views to take in. I really like that one. I don't know. I think I disproportionately like the Horizon games. I'm not quite sure why. It's some mixture of Aloy as a protagonist and the sci-fi, the strange, improbable future that they've come up with. And just the way that those games look so fucking beautiful. Like you can be just running through a mountain valley and there's a little stream burbling down. There's loads of particles in the air and like rabbits running across the path and the clouds and light and the rainstorm. And, there's just so many moments in those games. They do such an amazing job at the world. Yeah. I think they win me over just with the worlds. And then I also happen to like Aloy and sci-fi. So it's just, I don't know, I connect with it more than much better games. Like I connect with Horizons more than Red Dead somehow. I'm not exactly sure why. It just gets me.
Just into those vibes.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, one game that sprang to mind.
Leaves.
Yeah, one game that sprang to mind. We were talking about consequential change, which maybe it'd be interesting. Actually, it's on my list. Is Road Warden? Did you hear about this one?
No, I think you might have mentioned it to me when we spoke last. Is that the kind? It's quite text heavy, right, Road Warden?
Yeah, it's basically a text adventure with some little pixely vignettes that show a little glimpse of where you are. But you do rounds of a peninsula in this game. Basically, you're just a kind of a ranger. You're sent to a wild peninsula on the edge of a realm to scope out what's going on there, to sound out the locals who are rumored to be pretty wild, and to find out if there are any good resources that the kingdom might want. And there are lots and lots of small choices that you make in this game. I think it's the game in which my small choices have felt most consequential. So everyone that you meet, you do have an ostensible mission of sounding them out. Like, would you be willing to sell these textiles that you're making? How do you feel about the empire? Would you be interested in trade? And they all have different views in all the different villages that you come to. And you can choose to do your job and try and encourage them to open that trade route at the cost of friendship, because they will associate you with the empire often. Or you can choose to side with the locals to some degree, maybe hide the resources that they've got, win their trust, and open up other possible story outcomes. And every time that you do a little round of this peninsula, people remember you. They remember the things that you did the last time. And there are a lot of people that you meet, and they all remember you. So you have all of these evolving relationships going on. And it does feel like there are genuine options in how these people think of you based on the choices that you made. So, yeah, I just thought of it because we were talking about how open world games kind of fail at consequential choice. And I feel like Road Warden really succeeded at it.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I think it's just, for me, it's like, it feels like it feels like you could really waste a lot of time trying to make the player feel like they made an interesting choice, and or that they had made a choice. And I just don't know if it just never really works past the first time you do that in a game. It feels a bit flat. And I much prefer a game, I guess, kind of like you're describing, of it doesn't sort of make a big song and dance about the things that you're affecting. And it's more about kind of coloring in the story than it is straight up diverting it from one thing or another. Mm-hmm. It makes me think of something like Kentucky Route Zero, where it felt like when you said things as that character, and you could pick between sometimes you would pick kind of almost backstory when someone asks you a question, and that kind of stuff feels a lot more personal and interesting than picking to side with one person over another most of the time. Does that make
mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in Kentucky Route Zero, you can decide whether or not Conway responds by talking about his divorce, by talking about his alcoholism. Yeah. I think by picking alcoholism, you kind of summon it into his character, and it doesn't resonate through the story in any real meaningful way, but it definitely changes how you think of him and what your mind picture of Conway is, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just there now. It's just mm-hmm. there, and it can't be unchanged, and it just exists in the space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and the next game that you've got here is actually another one that I've never heard of before. It's the most exciting ones for me. The next one is called Hobbs Barrow. I've literally never heard of this game.
Well, you might have. I wrote it in shorthand. It's called The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow.
Nope, still don't know.
It came out around Halloween. It's like a spooky point-and-click adventure game, old style, kind of very classic styling, kind of LucasArts period. Published by Wadget Eyes. I can never say that word. And they, for anyone that likes adventure games, I would say you can just look at their catalog of stuff, and it's all really good, high quality, not annoying, well told stories of a range of different types. I would recommend them kind of entirely. I've played a few of their stuff now, and it's always really good. And The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow, I think, they just published this one. I don't remember who the developer was, but it is a short game about this lady who has come to excavate a barrow in kind of northern UK. She comes to this sleepy town where everyone's a little weird, and she's from a sort of middle upper class background, and everyone else is kind of more working class, I guess, and you can't really tell if the sort of distance and divide between her and them is more to do with where they're from, or if something else is going on in this town. And no one wants to tell you where this barrow is. She just likes finding old stuff and looking at it, I guess. And it's like a really traditional point and click adventure game in every way. It looks exactly like you imagine it. But I found it never annoying. I got stuck a few times, but not stuck, good stuck, adventure game stuck. I got stuck, but not this doesn't make sense. And every time I solved it, it was okay, yeah, no, that's fair. It's got a nice pacing. It's really well voice acted, a range of fun accents. And the pixel art is really lovely. It's really nice to see kind of, the British moors in 32 bits, I guess. It's very cozy in that sense, and it's not scary. It's more cosmic horror-y vibes. So yeah, there's just something off about this barrow. There's something inside it, and you need to find out what it is. And people keep telling you not to go there. And it's a really pleasant, successful little point-and-click game.
Yeah, looking at some screenshots of it now, it does look really nice. It's got those like white painted thatched houses, nice countryside. Looks strange, almost like a sort of Ted Hughesy wilderness stuff going on. How's the writing in this one?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's effective. I like. I don't think I really felt. It didn't feel like cringy. I feel like it could be quite easy to do that stuff wrong. It's good writing. Story's good. I probably wasn't like super satisfied with, maybe not quite how it ended, but like the sort of final section of the game. Maybe I kind of dropped out a little bit, but the tension building and like and all that stuff I think is really well done. And it has these really nice like kind of rotoscoped animated cutscenes. You know, when you meet a character of interest, like these really kind of high dense pixel art of like these characters sort of introducing themselves or like doing something slightly gross or whatever. And they all look really good. It's really it's worth it. It's worth checking out. I can't remember how long it is now, but it's not very long.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. And the last one that you've got here on your 2022 list is another game that seems that mystery is perhaps the thing that people like most about this one. This one, I played a little bit of Tunic, and I found it super hard, and I kind of bounced, despite wanting to love it, and tried to start it a bunch of times, and like got a little bit further each time when they brought in the new difficulty options and stuff. But people that love this game really love this game. You know, there are people that think that it's maybe, people talk about it in the same way that Fez obsessives talk about Fez, like the untangling of the strange mystery. So how was your time with Tunic?
I haven't finished it. I think I'm pretty close. But I just kind of didn't pick it back up again a few months ago. But I really loved that mystery stuff. I wasn't a big fan of Fez, and I think that's because I felt like the mystery of it was kind of immediately obscure, and there really wasn't much to take from it straight away. Whereas in Tunic, it feels like you kind of immediately understand what everything is and who you are, and like it has a very clear reference point to sort of work from, and you kind of just go. Whereas in Fez, it's a bit more like immediately like, oh, I don't know what that means. Tunic, is I think it also came around the same time as Elden Ring, so I didn't want to play it straight away because I had also heard that it was quite hard. And I didn't find it too bad. I think I was really just kind of enraptured, let's say, by the kind of in-game manual stuff. In Tunic, you find these kind of retro, kind of Zelda-style video game manuals that tell you the controls, but also give you secrets and hints and stuff. And like some of it you won't understand. And one of the neat things about Tunic is that a lot of the stuff that you find in those manuals you can do from the start. So like I won't spoil any of it because I think it's all really fun. But like there's like genuine like simple button presses or movement mechanics that you can do from get-go that the manual will then tell you when you find that piece of paper however many hours in. And that changes things dramatically quite a lot of the time. I don't know. I've heard that it gets like the mystery stuff gets quite complex by the end. So I'm not so interested in exploring what that might be. But for where I was, it hit like a really nice, I feel like I had a really good grasp of like what I was doing and what to do next. And I really like Tunic. It's a really lovely game.
Yeah, it's also heavy on the mood and nostalgia, isn't it? I mean, I absolutely love the music for this one. It's got this lovely, soft electronic synth soundtrack. And it obviously harkens back to 2D Zelda with your little fox dressed in a Link costume and those nice, cozy little, you've got your sword, you've got your shield, and here is where you save. Just all those really nice, familiar things. But I don't think I really got far enough in to start tapping into some of the deeper stuff where it really takes off. And I really want to, man. I don't know if I've got it in me to try
Yeah.
Tunic for a fourth time, but I'm just jealous of that experience.
What was the additional difficulty mode they added? Did it just give you more health or something?
Yeah, so it started with default difficulty and invincibility mode, and then they put one in called reduced difficulty, where I got further. I got to the first proper boss, like the garden boss guy, who has a big club and area of effect stuff. And I think it just, you take a little less damage, and you deal a little more damage. It's just a tweak, really.
And did you find you weren't putting it down because of the difficulty, or just because it wasn't grabbing you overall?
I would say that it was grabbing me overall, but I think, like, having played, I'm not naturally a difficult game fan. I did play Elden Ring this year and got pretty far into that and sort of managed it. But I think that the reason that I was able to take on things like Hyper Light Drifter, Hollow Knight, and Elden Ring, which are all games that are too hard for me, was that the controls are super, super crispy. Like, they are pinpoint controls, and you always feel entirely in control of what you're doing. Hyper Light Drifter feels very precise. Hollow Knight feels like perfection is attainable. And Elden Ring just offers you lots of ways to solve the problem of the combat, if you know what I mean. You can find the one that suits you, whether it's the magic, ranged, whether it's parrying, and that sort of thing, and critical hits. And I felt like in Tunic, for me, the controls were very soft and flumpy. And I felt like my role was kind of maybe not... I felt like the iframes weren't in a place that my brain was understanding, and so I would often roll and get hit anyway. Something in that combat, I felt like the precision required for that level of difficulty wasn't happening for me in the controls. So I think that friction, for me personally, was enough to make me put it down. But folks that seem to click with the controls and be able to execute the rolls and dodges and so forth, seem to have absolutely loved it. So I think it's very much a me thing in this case.
I think I feel similarly. It's just like the controls themselves and the movement, the character movement isn't quite as like precise as you'd want it for like what some of the bosses are kind of pushing you to do. Like, it made me think a lot about like Death's Door. Very similar kind of structure. And Death's Door, I didn't like Death's Door as much as Tunic really by quite a lot. I think probably because it was missing the layer of mystery that Tunic has, but like Death's Door definitely feels a bit sharper, and like yeah.
Tunic. I had Brian Skirsha on, and it was on his list, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it more. I've got Brad Galloway coming on to talk about his games of the year. Everyone seems to have Tunic on their list from wherever they come on the gaming spectrum this year. So it really is like one of the indie babes of the year. But on your top 5 here, so 3 of those games that we've just talked about from 2022 make up your top 5. There are also 2 here that were not released this year, but that you played for the first time this year. Really interesting pair of games. So let's talk about those to round it out. The first one is, I guess, super relevant to this year, actually, as they've just announced a whole new bunch of Silent Hill games coming out, right? So you've got here Silent Hill Shattered Memories.
Yes.
I don't know about this one. I've played the original. I played Silent Hill 1 and 2 on the PlayStation, I think, and really liked them. Really liked the really thick atmosphere, the fog, the strangeness, like going around a really creepy old school, hearing people crying. They were super creepy, super effective, atmospheric games. But I don't think I ever finished either of them, but I do think of them fondly. But I don't know what Shattered Memories is. Is this one of the ones that came after?
Yeah, Shattered Memories is like during the period, well, basically post Silent Hill 4, I think, when like Konami started outsourcing development to like American developers, and almost universally everyone hates them. The quality just dropped quite significantly, really. Shattered Memories, now this is it's a hot topic, so I apologize, but I feel like maybe Shattered Memories is one of the more fondly thought of I think the studio is from the UK. They were called Climax, and I doubt they still exist. But it was written by Sam Barlow, who is the guy that wrote and directed Immortality and Her Story. And you can see his interests and the kind of stuff that he went on to make in Shattered Memories. Shattered Memories is a very, very funny game. Like, I would not say it's like perfect by any stretch, but like I've been meaning to check it out for a really long time, and it's fascinating. Like it's really interesting. It is Silent Hill in many ways. You are in Silent Hill. You're wandering around. I think you're playing as Harry, which is the protagonist from the first game. So it's the same guy. It's basically technically you could say it's like a retelling, even though the story is very different. And I think it was originally scoped for the Wii. So it has all this like flashlight mechanic stuff where you're pointing a flashlight around and looking at things. The thing probably that is, well, there are two things that are really interesting about it. The first is that, like, in some ways it feels like a walking sim before walking sims became a big thing. And definitely before horror games became all walking sims. So there is you don't commit any violence in Shattered Memories. You have these large sections where you wander around the town of Silent Hill, looking at objects and solving very simple puzzles. And then shorter sections, which really I wish weren't there, which I think is what everyone feels like, where these things start chasing you and you need to sort of escape this kind of icy maze. And the wandering around sections with your flashlight, it's in third person, and just looking at stuff. I played the PS2 version, is such a delight. They're really lovely, sort of realized spaces. The sort of usual Silent Hill areas, like a shopping center or a school or whatever. Like, there's traditional kind of like obvious spooky things, but it's not. Yeah, it's really, there's no real scares to it, and it's got usual sort of Silent Hill funky beats playing in the background all of the time anyway. But it's really, that's really neat. But it also has this other thing which is hilarious but also interesting, where when you first boot up the game, before you see any other like developer logos or anything like that, it says like something along the lines of like, psychology warning, this game tracks your whatever, your psyche, and it will play you as much as you play it, or something, which is incredibly dorky. And basically what the game is doing is tracking kind of, I guess, a range of things, but the obvious things it's tracking is like the stuff that you look at and how long you look at it, they're just kind of tracking your general movements, and it seems to be logging, like putting some number somewhere saying, okay, he looked at this poster for 5 seconds and we're putting that in this category of person. And then over time it kind of like builds this very corny, like kind of like online personality test vibe of who you are as a person. And then interstitial, like in between these, it's like cutting to you're in a literal psychiatrist's office who's asking you just the most ridiculous questions that no psychiatrist has ever asked you. The first thing he does is like he slides a piece of paper over and he gives you like, he's like, this is the only form you need to fill out. And like the form is like 5 boxes, and like it's like the final question after several slightly less ridiculous questions is like, have you ever had an affair? It's like, okay. And then you like tick yes or no. And then like he looks at the paper and he turns to you and he says, never had an affair, huh? And it's just completely absurd. I have no idea if Sam Barlow thinks this is actually what therapy is like or not. Hopefully not. But it's amazing. And like, yeah, I assume all those things that you're doing in his psychology office as well are kind of adding to the personality that the Harry you are playing becomes. Seemingly the things that change, talking about like choices and stuff, I guess, the things that seem to change really are like the clothes that Harry wears. And I think maybe his personality, the clothes that other characters wear, and some environmental stuff. I knew kind of some of the stuff going in, obviously, and it's hard once you know that to sort of play it naturally. But the thing you notice immediately is like their main personality like structures seem to be horny or not horny, because like like half of there's posters on the wall and like half of them are just like, here's a picture of a truck, and the other is like, here's a naked lady, and it's like it's absurd. And I'm really curious. I really desperately want to see, like, not that I would understand it, but I want to see like all the numbers and stuff behind it, because I was playing it and I was like, well, surely no matter like your gender or sexuality, you're going to be more interested at looking at the naked lady than a truck. Like, humans are designed to look at faces. Your focus is going to be on that. So surely it's like slightly heavily weighted on that. So is the code like accounting for the fact that you're more likely to look at the naked lady or something? So like maybe it has to be 10 seconds if you're staring or something. Like, I really want to know how it works. I'm sure I could Google it. I'm sure people have written a lot about it. But yeah, it's fascinating and weird and goofy, and there's some like good moments. Some of the writing's a bit dumb, but some of it's all right. And overall, it's just like a nice vibe of like wandering around this snowy, empty town, looking at weird stuff inside shops.
That sounds. It was giving me like a David Cage vibes as you were talking about this, like psychological profile stuff. Like, what on earth are they trying to prove?
Gosh. I don't know. There's the best bit was in the psychiatrist's office. He gives you another piece of paper, and it's like a outline drawing of a like a family home, and he gives you these coloring pencils, and he says like, why don't you color this in to look like your ideal family home, and so you've got all these like primary colors of like pink, blah blah blah, and so it's like, I'll color in the car blue, and I'll color in the house pink, and there's two people outside, I'll give them yellow t-shirts and red jeans, that looks normal, and then it smash cuts to that house rendered in real time in those colors. And it's like, why? This has no bearing on anything.
Wow.
And then you open the door and these two people come out in their like ridiculously colored clothing. And it's like, who is going to paint that? We've got like 6 colors. You've got like a brown and a green in there. Who is going to paint their house like a normal color? Like it looks like a child's drawing. And now I just have a massive pink house in this cutscene. Fascinating. Absolutely extraordinary.
Does it feel earnest? Like, does it feel like it's earnestly trying to do something that hasn't been done before in games?
I make fun of it. But I think it's really cool. I think it's a really neat idea, and you can kind of see the trajectory. I'm sure, like, obviously Sam Barlow, he's not credited as director. I'm sure, like, the team as a whole came up with a lot of these ideas, and it was a group effort. But you can see, like, how he could take some of that stuff and how that's weaved into like things like Her Story and Immortality and stuff of that. Like, and there's like a whole VHS aesthetic going on, which is like, oh yeah, okay, I can see what he likes. Yeah.
Sounds like an interesting one. I've played all the Sam Barlow games and absolutely loved Immortality this year, so really curious to see him just doing something else, really. All of those games are very much of a piece or belong to the same trajectory, don't they? So this sounds like a really interesting outlier for him. Okay, so the last game that you've got on your list here, it's a driving game, but it's an interesting one. I haven't played it. I've seen it around. This one is SnowRunner, which I can't remember if it came after or before MudRunner, but from what my limited understanding of this one is that you have to drive heavy, unwieldy vehicles across difficult terrain. Is that right?
That is a very accurate description. It came after MudRunner. They have this. They did something weird. The original game was called Spin Tires, and then I think they rebranded it to MudRunner. And then maybe they made a sequel, and then they made SnowRunner. I don't know. And then the weird thing about SnowRunner is the first map you come into has no snow. So SnowRunner is, you are a truck driver, and you acquire lots of trucks and upgrades for your trucks as you drive through mud and eventually, hopefully, snow. It is coming back to, there's a lot of theming going on, coming back to like the whole open world thing. Like it is like pure open world filler content from top to bottom. So it's like ideal for me. So there's no like story stuff or like, blah, 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 blah. There's no cutscenes. It's just like tasks that you get given. It's closest like game, I would say, which is kind of dumb, but it's a lot like Death Stranding, except without the ego in the center of it. It's just a lot of trucks. So yeah, it is just making deliveries, going from one place to another, and trying to stay upright across a range of terrains. It's an incredibly chill game. It's such a slow burn. It's like, I don't know how many hours I've played of it, but like maybe like 20 or so hours, and I'm still in the first zone, of which I think there are 4 zones before DLC. And I've basically done, I feel like I've done nothing. The amount of money you get to like buy upgrades in trucks is like tiny. You have to just go in prepared with the fact that you are going to be driving like 5 miles per hour through mud, and that's it. Like, don't expect anything else. But it's excellent. It's like such a good time. Incredibly frustrating and also very soothing. Yeah, I love it. I love SnowRunner.
It's a strange one to think about, really, because the moment in any game, really, if you're traversing an environment and you kind of come up against, like if you get caught on something you're not supposed to get caught on, or if you end up like in Halo Infinite, I remember using the vehicles in that, and the physics was so strange. There are moments where you just hit the maximum steepness that the vehicle can take and you end up rolling backwards. Yeah. It's kind of fun, kind of frustrating too. And it seems like this game is based entirely on that frustration.
Yeah, exactly. I it makes me think a lot about, like, I used to spend countless hours, as a kid, probably still today if I think about it hard enough, but like just getting a car and trying to drive up an incline that it wasn't quite suited for in whatever game I was currently playing. And like the challenge was just to get to the top of the incline and then I guess just go back down again. So like, yeah, I don't know how many hours in like how many GTA games I've tried to get some car up some muddy hill that it's not supposed to go up. But it's that, but like properly gamified. You need to think about, the weight distribution. You have like massive, like hilarious, I can't believe these are real things. Like the trailers that these trucks like carry behind them are just absurd sometimes. They're like, it's ridiculous, but you have to drive these ridiculous things across just like impossibly stupid environments. Like it's I wouldn't say it's quite like it doesn't feel like a simulator game in the same way that like like Euro Truck Simulator is, because the spaces that you're in, they are like technically real places. Like I'm in Michigan, but like it's very gamey. Like everything has been laid out to create a challenge. Whereas in like something Euro Truck Simulator, you're just driving across a map made to look like a place. And I could not speak to the realism of the physics or the mud. But it's a good time. You can, put stickers on the inside of your truck and that's fun. It's good.
Sounds like a supremely Louis game. To round this out, I'm going to try it. I think it's on Game Pass. I think at some point I had it downloaded and ready to go, and it might have done a memory juggle and thrown it to one side, but definitely intrigued by it. Does sound like one of those meditative games where you can just, I had a lot of fun this year with Power Wash Simulator, which I guess is in the similar ballpark, right? You're just doing this strange, borderline tedious task, and that too has moments of frustration because, like, for all of its best efforts, if you're cleaning an entire theme park with a hose pipe, there are going to be spots of mud that you miss, and it does have a highlighting system to find them. But if it's a whole theme park, you can hit that highlighting button and you're not going to see it unless you're standing in the right place anyway. So it doesn't really solve the problem. But there was really something about that. It was such a strange one Power Wash Simulator. It just so satisfying. It's such a strange way, just executing this task.
I think the difference is SnowRunner is a bit like Power Wash Simulator if like maybe every 20 minutes someone came along and like chucked a bit more dirt on it that you'd already cleaned up. Like you can get like some of these like tasks, you're driving like 2 miles per hour because the game gives you like some rubbish trucks at the start and upgrades are expensive and blah, blah, blah. So you're like completely unequipped to do these like quite simple tasks and you're driving through this ridiculous amount of mud, or you're like halfway drowned in water and you just need to get over to the other side and it's like 20 meters away, and then you're using your winch, but then you accidentally like drive up a slight incline on the left and the truck tips over and then the engine stalls, which means you can't use the winch, so you have to reset and start again, and that's just then you probably have to go pick up the resources from wherever you originally got them, which might not be anywhere near where they need to be. So it's like, I wouldn't say it's like most of the time frustrating, especially if you just kind of accept that you're going to need to take your time, but it does throw up and purposefully has like barriers where something like Power Wash Simulator is more just like, here's a full Zen, just clean. Here's a space to clean. This is more like, it's a little bit more like friction with something like SnowRunner.
Yeah, super interesting. Thanks for the encouragement to go and try it out. We'll definitely do so. You've actually got. I have to go now. I have to go and cook a Christmas dinner for my family before I fly back to Iceland tomorrow. But I really enjoyed talking to you, and you've got so many more games I want to talk about with you here. You've got a list of games that you want to play more: Elden Ring, Norco, Sonic Frontiers, which I would love to hear from you on, and Atari 50.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe we can get back together and talk these through later if you would like to, or something like that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I'd love to finish Norco and Sonic and Atari. I'm like a little ways through all of them, so I'd love to like just play them more and just hear. Yeah, I'm hoping I get to catch what your games of the year were on a different episode, and we can talk about that stuff another time too, maybe.
Yeah, it would be great to do that, and it's always lovely to talk to you. Really nice to catch up with you, and thanks for adding a few curveballs to my own 2 playlist here. Definitely got to try Sephonie. It sounds fascinating. The screenshots have really got some charisma to them, and you've encouraged me to give Strange Horticulture a chance on a bigger screen. So thank you.
Yeah, it should run on anything. I think it's not like over the top or anything.
Yeah, and I'll be doing my own final games of the year list. I'm still shuffling it around a little bit, but it's nearly there. I think I'm going to try and get it out before year end, just for the closure. Nice. And yeah, where should people come and find you online, Louis?
So Lockie and I do Time Play 3HR, which is a podcast about playing games for 3 hours at a time. You can check that out. We do not put up as much as we used to, but we are planning to do a Game of the Year episode of all the games we played this year, so that might be a good intro spot. And I'm not really on social media at the moment, so that's basically it.
All right, keep watching the skies.
But thank you for having me, John. Always a lot of fun.
Yeah, and have a good New Year. Thanks a lot, Louis.
So that was the Games of the Year episode with Louis Brooks of Time Played 3HR. Please do check out Time Played 3HR. It's a wonderful podcast. There's a huge backlog of very interesting games. Louis has great taste and Lockie does too, and they give each other a game each week to play, so they kind of nominate games to each other, which leads to some really interesting conversations. It's a really good podcast, and if you have made it this far, then I guess that the audio wasn't bad enough to put you off, so I'm glad that you were able to listen to that podcast. Sorry again about the audio quality on my side. I am starting to suspect, having edited this, that I accidentally selected the laptop mic, because that just does not sound like any microphone that I've used before. But thanks very much for listening anyway. I hope that you enjoyed it. You can come and find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. as Gaming in the Wild. You're also welcome to become a patron of this show if you enjoyed the show at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. I also very much appreciate anyone that leaves a star rating on Spotify or a written review on Apple Podcasts, and people who share the podcast with their friends. I hear from people that have discovered the podcast because it was recommended to them. So if you know someone that might like the show, I really appreciate you sharing it with people. So I've got a few more Games of the Year episodes to come. I'm recording one with Brad Galloway of So Video Games podcast today. I'm finalising my own final cut of the Gaming in the Wild Games of the Year 2022. So there are a couple more Games of the Year podcasts to come before normal service is resumed next year. Not quite sure how I'm going to space those out over the next few weeks. I do like to try and round off the year with a little bit of closure and get it done around the turn of the new year, but that's 3 episodes in just a couple days, so I'm not quite sure of the publishing schedule for those yet, but please do stay tuned and you'll get them all as I put them out and as they are completed. Thanks very much to everyone who has been listening this year. It's been a really big year for the podcast. The listeners have been going up and up, and we've been getting some lovely feedback from people who've been enjoying the show. So a big thank you to all the patrons of the show, all of the listeners of the show, all of the guests, and all of the people who've been championing it on social media and sharing it with friends and so forth. Thank you very much for making this a really enjoyable year of games for me. I'll be back next week or sooner with a brand new episode. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.